Object we are going to explore is one of my favorite items in the museum. It is a map of Texas from 1836. When I walk past it in the galleries, the first thing that always draws my eye is the symbol on the right-hand corner, a bold eagle proudly perched on a cactus, with ornate font proclaiming Map of Texas with parts of the adjoining state. Soon my eyes wander to the carefully etched lines. The state is both familiar and unfamiliar. The coastal lines and rivers exactly where you'd expect, but the iconic panhandle is missing. As you look longer, you realize the map is a deeply complex statement of Texas and its position in the 1830s. Join with me as we peel back these layers and explore a Texas about to burst into revolution. This was not the first time the engraver, John Ware, had carefully polished the emerging lines of the Mexican state of Texas out of a sheet of copper. His first brush was in 1829, as he worked with the prominent mapmaker Henry S. Tanner to publish the first printed map of Texas. Tanner had been approached by a merchant, Thomas Leeming, with an interesting proposition. Leeming had a cousin in Texas, a businessman named Stephen F. Austin. Austin had been working since 1821 to draft a map of Texas, and his work was almost completed. He knew that getting a map of Texas published in the United States would be a boon to the colony he was trying to establish in the northern Mexican frontier. Only a little information was available about the geography of Texas, and no printed maps of Texas existed in the United States. Austin's problem was how to pay for the printing. Printing was expensive, and Austin was the textbook example of land-rich, cash-poor. Austin asked Leeming to feel out potential publishers, asking if Leeming could find one that would print the map with no upfront cost to Austin, if Austin signed over the publication rights. Tanner immediately saw the potential and was willing to risk the upfront costs. Tanner's gamble paid off. The map was so successful, Tanner ordered a succession of prints. Normally, engravings were expensive, and successive reprints would have used the same plates. For some reason, possibly because of Texas' rapid changes and developments in the 1830s, each new publication used a new plate. These plates were carefully updated, mapping the shifting winds of Texas. For Ware, this would be his fourth engraving of Texas, each slightly and subtly changing. As Ware finished transferring the map onto the plate, he or his partner would carefully etch the lines into metal. The map began as a copper plate. The smooth, polished sheet of copper had been coated in a thin layer of wax, smoothed evenly over the plate with a feather. Engraving was tricky because everything had to be done in reverse. Engravers needed to have good artistic ability, excellent judgment, and attention to detail to transfer detailed cartographical information accurately onto the plate. The easiest way to do this was placing a drawing face down on the plate and then rubbing with a polisher or a pencil that would transfer the design to a wax coating. After the sketch was successfully transferred, Ware would use a sharp knife to skillfully begin to etch the lines into copper. Traditionally, the first lines to be etched were the basic geographic details. The Mexican state of Tejas was defined by its rivers. Etching out the northern border, Ware would have carved out Red River, its branches and curves only recently defined. Deeply contested as a border after the Louisiana Purchase, despite an official treaty by Spain and the United States in 1819, the land between the Sabine existed as a rough no man's land, a chaotic mixture of Americans, Mexicans, and native nations. Ware would have continued west, carefully etching the many creeks and bayous of the Natchez and the Trinity Rivers. As he reached the boundaries of Galveston Bay, Ware would begin to etch the heart of American settlement. When Ware first etched this map in 1829, only Austin and DeWitt's colony existed, nestled along the Brazos and Colorado rivers. The rivers supported a rich black bottomland, perfect for growing cotton. A global cotton boom, driven by England's steam mills, had driven up cotton prices. As American public land became more and more expensive to purchase, the cheap, seemingly endless land along the Brazos and the Colorado called to settlers looking to make their fortune in cotton. They had poured into Texas and by 1836 numbered around 35,000. American settlers set up cotton plantations and farms up and down the Brazos and Colorado rivers, using the rivers to float their goods down to the coast for trade with New Orleans. American settlement thinned as Ware began to trace the Guadalupe and San Antonio rivers, pouring into the San Antonio Bay. Large Tejano cattle ranches spread across the area, bookended by the Hispanic settlements of Béjar and Goliad. Finally, Ware etched the Nueces River, the last river of Texas. He may have wondered why Tejas ended at the Nueces River. When Tanner accepted the commission to publish Austin's map, he first thought the map would be of the combined state of Coahuila y Tejas. Texas had been combined with Coahuila since 1824, and the map should have continued south according to current political boundaries. Austin, however, deliberately scratched out Coahuila, wanting to highlight the future and potential of Texas. With the rivers done, Ware may have turned to etch out the major points of interest, including towns, military posts, and Native American villages. The main settlements, sprinkled along the major transportation arteries of the El Camino Real and the Brazos River, remained unchanged from the original proof. New towns, however, sprang up with each subsequent etching, pushing American settlement out from the Brazos and the Colorado into the Galveston Bay area in East Texas. San Antonio de Béjar, commonly known as Béjar, was Texas's capital, playing second provisional fiddle to the state's official capital at Saltillo in Coahuila. This caused no end of frustration to the people of Texas, who had been advocating for separate statehood since almost the beginning of the ill-fated union of the two states in 1824. Although what little political power Tejas held in state and federal politics lay in Béjar, by 1836, regional power in Texas was held up the road in San Felipe de Austin. The de facto capital of Austin's colony, American settlers flocked to the small town to solidify land grants and launch petitions to the Mexican government. Although losing power when Ware scratched it onto a map for the fourth time, it was still one of the most influential towns within the state. Its existence at the crossroads of the Brazos and the road to Béjar showed the meeting of Hispanic and American settlement. Ware continued down the Brazos, tracing cities he was probably familiar with from previous etching: Old Fort, Bolivar, Brazoria, Velasco, tracing the route of a bale of cotton as it worked its way down the Brazos on steamships. But Ware may have noticed the new settlement centers that had developed since his first etching in 1829. Settlement along Galveston Bay had exploded, with towns like Liberty and Anahuac joining Harrisburg. East Texas was growing rapidly, with San Augustine making it on the map, and Turan and Zavala. But despite the growth, there were no official ports to inscribe on the map. The town of Galveston made its way onto this new map, but it was a figment of imagination in 1836. Nothing but a sandbar. Petition after petition had been advanced to establish an official port. This would have fostered economic growth, allowing transatlantic ships to create direct links between Texas and England. It would have fostered closer ties with Mexico, creating a faster, more direct connection, and eased Texas' current sense of isolation from Mexico. Ware may have noticed an increase in military posts instead of ports and other civilian infrastructure. Where the original map listed no garrisons in Texas, by 1836, the map was peppered with evidence of a growing Mexican military presence. A garrison on the Brazos near Cow Creek, Fort Tenochtitlan, and Anahuac gave geographical evidence of a growing Mexican concern about the future of Texas. Little did Ware realize the increased militarization of Texas was directly tied to the latitude and longitude lines he would work on next. The original printed map in 1830 had been significantly delayed because Austin had been waiting for observations made by General Mir y Terán. Terán had visited Austin and San Felipe in 1828. His publicly announced mission was the Scientific Boundary Commission. The Mexican national government realized how complicated it was to rule Tejas without any real knowledge of the geography or resources of the state. Terán was tasked with a scientific study to travel through Texas to gather data. This public task was only a cover for Terán's true mission to Texas, to spy on the American settlers and gather military intelligence. Through the 1820s, the Mexican national government became increasingly concerned about its hold on Tejas. Ripped apart by multiple civil wars since 1824, the central Mexican government watched Americans swirl into Texas like a hurricane, with little oversight or control. The central government wanted an accurate picture of the true state of Texas. What Terran saw there alarmed him. Texas, isolated from the interior of Mexico, was becoming more and more Americanized. At one point, Terran and his men were forced to write notes in Latin to talk with a plantation owner on the Brazos who didn't speak Spanish. Terran realized that if the Mexican government didn't act quickly, Tejas would soon slip out of its grasp. An attempt was made in the early 1830s to consolidate power in Texas. By 1836, however, these attempts were largely in ashes. Civil unrest and Terran's suicide in 1832 hampered any attempts to consolidate Mexican's federal power. Lines were becoming increasingly drawn in Texas about its future. As Ware began to work on the dedications, these lines became etched onto the map. When Stephen F. Austin sent his final version to Tanner in 1829, he recommended the Mexican coat of arms be included on the map. Tanner must have agreed to the prominence of this because the eagle and cactus occupy some of the map's largest visual space. But Tanner, or perhaps Austin, inserted a coat of arms with a specific political meaning. Rising from a woody stump, the cactus is a careful profusion of leaves. Within each leaf is delicately written with the name of each Mexican state, including Coahuila y Tejas. The design was a signal of allegiance to Mexican federalism, the idea that the country would be the strongest under a decentralized government with strong states' rights. These beliefs were encoded in the Mexican Constitution of 1824. The idea's legitimacy was reinforced by the cactus and eagle crowned by a Pharyngean cap, a floppy cap that looks kind of like an old sailor's knitted cap. This old symbol dated back to the Roman period, when an emancipated slave received a felt cap as a sign of his newly won freedom. During the Enlightenment, this symbol was resurrected to represent freedom and liberty. By crowning the Mexican Federalist cactus with this cap, the engraving created a strong visual message to its viewers about the future of Mexico the map makers wanted etched out. By the time Ware finished his engraving and Tanner had published his 1836 edition, the map was already outdated. The struggles and challenges encoded in the map had reached a boiling point. Texas had become engulfed in a revolution that would change its course, and Ware would have again had to pull out his engraving tools. This time, however, he wasn't etching out the Mexican state of Tejas, but the independent Republic of Texas.
We hope you enjoyed our first episode. In the second episode, 10 Steps to War, we dive into the simmering tensions of the early 1830s through two of the leading families, the Austins and the Whartons. Their rivalry and division mirrored the increasing division between those looking to cry war and those who wanted peace.